Hey folks, this is Grant Estrad over at Local Cooling Farms. I'm in the egg room studio. We're at the blackboard, and I just wanted to pick up where we left off on the first introduction video of the things that we're going to be talking about in this realm, and give you some examples of how it shows itself when folks are trying to do a direct-to-consumer farm business, and that's either livestock or produce, right? So the other day we talked about personal development. We talked about goal setting, qualified goals. We talked about building your team, and we talked about leading your team. So you may ask, well, why should I invest in time into kind of organizing this and reading this and doing all the effort and into studying this stuff and applying it to your situation, your context? Well, I may hit home with a couple of folks on this. And I'm a personal development. When I say personal development, that's really working on your own mind and your own perspective and where you are. If you're thinking positively or if you're thinking negatively, right? So the example I used in the previous video was this video is kind of amateur hour, right? And so I've got negative self-talk of saying like, hey, people are going to think that your video is a little weird. I'm okay with that. I've accepted that. That's fine. But I've got enough positive self-talk that I've built up over the years to say, no, Grant, you got to start someplace. You got to crawl before you walk and things of that nature. So I'm okay with doing it this way. So what happens? Like, what's a really good example when somebody wants to start up a farm or get into agriculture, right? Well, oftentimes, folks leave an urban setting or a city. They move out to a rural area or the country. Even if they stay in an urban area and they want to work on an urban farm, your hours change, your seasons change. You may not be able to go out and do social things anymore because you've got living things that you have to take care of. And so you're giving up a previous life, for another type of life to where you're anchored down a little bit. Classic examples that you can't leave the farm because of the livestock or whatever, right? And so, what happens with your social group when you decide to go into farming is that you kind of become a little bit of an outsider within your social network. And that's fine, so folks who think that are really close friends, maybe they're not going to be so close after you decide to move out and do the farm. They're going to be like, what are you thinking, right? And so that's an example of, working on yourself, because when we make a big life change, like starting a farm, we may not be carrying our social group with us into that lifestyle, and that's perfectly okay. And we may have a real hard mental time with saying like, oh man, my friends really aren't supporting me the way that I anticipated that they were going to support us, or my family is not supporting me in a way that I thought that they were going to support us by making the decision to go into agriculture or farming. And so, that messes with people's minds a lot. And so, we need to, that's an example, right? So, that's an area where sometimes we really need to work on personal development ourselves, because by us shifting and doing something kind of weird, going into farming, we become the outsider in our social group. Now, the big thing that we're going to do is that we're going to find a new social group, but going through that transition is a big change, and it is very stressful, right? So that's an example of an area that you would be able to get through a little bit quicker, or successfully get through it, right? We don't want somebody wanting to start a farm business and then they get down on themselves and then they think, I can't do this because their social group isn't supporting themselves, and so therefore they don't do it, right? So that would be an example of where that could cause problems, becoming an outsider in your social group, and then you're telling yourself that you can't do it, right? So on a goal setting thing, a lot of times areas in farms where I see people make mistakes is that they base their goals on industrial agriculture, right? The direct-to-consumer market space, you're really a grocer. It's like you're operating a grocery store. You happen to be raising, the crops for the livestock, but, you're in the parts and pieces business. You're not, you're like a chop shop for cars. You're not selling cars anymore. You're selling pieces and parts, right? So you're a grocer. You're not selling pigs. You're selling pork chops, right? And so some folks, I feel like they set their goals on an industrial model, on production, right? We got to have a lot of production, and they're like, oh, I've got this many head, or I'm producing this many pounds or this many tons, and they get obsessed with production when they don't sit back and say, wait a minute, why am I, basing my goals on production when I'm really not in a production business? I'm in direct to consumer farm business, and I'm really a grocer, right? And so you may be placing your goals in the wrong paradigm relative to what you actually want to do as a direct to consumer farmer. So that would be an example of not setting the appropriate goals relative to what you actually want to achieve, right? Building your team. The big thing that I mentioned it the other day, was rugged individualism, right? So many of us, we want to farm because we want to live off the land and we want to be self-sufficient. But that's a false concept, right? Even if something, a big, huge catastrophe happens, that's when we actually need more people. So, right, we're not even through it yet, COVID-19. We really needed other people in that case. Now, we stayed away from a lot of people, right? But we realized that we really needed that network and that ecosystem where we needed to rely upon other people. And so if you get into farming because you think that you're super tough and you're going to do it by yourself, in a very small family unit with excluding other people, we see people get burnt out from that, and they don't have the emotional support. For example, a tie-in, if you start your farm project, with the concept of rugged individualism, and then you leave the city to go to a rural setting, and then what's going to happen is that you're going to become the outsider because the social group that supported you when you were in the city, they're not going to follow you out to the rural area. And so because it's not going to be TGIF anymore, down the street at the bar, right? Because you're going to be living out in the country. So it's not cocktail hour. You can't just run down the street and go party or go out to eat and do all those really cool social things that the city offers. And so you're going to be like, what's going on, right? And so you really need to get the idea of rugged individualism and make sure that you understand that you actually do need a team. So what happens here is that I'm saying that you need to build a team. A lot of people are actually trying to go out, without building a team. And that's a big area where people get stressed out and burnt out emotionally and physically as well. In this area of leading your team, probably one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is that they're too busy managing. We can spend hours talking about the difference between leadership and management. It's two totally different things, right? Management is overseeing, let's say, the production of goods. How fast are we doing it? How are we doing it? Leadership is going to ask, why are we doing it, right? And so if you get into the weeds and you're busy managing, another phraseology that people use, that you're too busy working in your business and you're not busy working on your business. All of us wear multiple hats, but we have to understand that we can't hang out in management 100% of the time, right? So sometimes we're real boots on the ground, we're doing a lot of the work. Sometimes we're managing, but we have to cut out time and reserve time to be able to lead your team. Because if you're not leading your team and all you're doing is managing your team or working alongside your team, then you may realize that the direction is off, and then the goals that you're setting are not going in the right appropriate direction. So remember the 4 different areas: personal development, goals, building your team, and leading your team. 4 things that people do within these areas where I see they experience burnout, failure, or they barely get their farm business off the ground is they can't overcome becoming an outsider because they've chosen to do the farm. The example is that they've left their social group behind, right? And that's very stressful. Basing goals on industrial ag and production and not upon goals as if you're a retail salesperson or a grocer running a grocery store, right? Team building, you do not build your team because you believe in rugged individualism is a problem. And then when it comes to leading your team, you're too busy managing, working in your business, and you don't set aside time to actually lead your business and work on your business. So those are just 4 examples to where you can get into trouble if you don't pay attention to these 4 categories. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any comments, if you have any questions, put them in below. And if you like what you're seeing, please subscribe, because that's going to give me the confidence and the support and the encouragement to keep doing videos and keep improving what we're doing. So everybody have a fantastic day. Thank you.